Boris Derek podcast, and we are back. Joining me today, the voice that fans have been clamoring for weeks now, co-host extraordinaire Drew Semler. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Thanks for the people who noticed I was gone for a little here. I think today's a big day. Today's a day a lot of people are going to learn that UConn's point guard is named Solo Ball. He's a sophomore. For how successful UConn's been the last couple of years, back-to-back titles, Jan Hurley's greatness, they've been a little bit under the radar this year just because they're not nearly as special a team, and will probably beat Oklahoma and then lose in round two to Florida. But yeah, their point guard's name is literally Solo Ball. And this isn't like a science experiment where LeVar Ball had his leg amputated in order to create a fourth Ball brother. Solo Ball is unrelated. I've done the research. I just can't believe it's his name. And yeah, welcome back to March Madness. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange time in the NBA. This is always kind of like the most dead part of the NBA calendar. Like people talk about the dog days in January or whatever. That's always a more interesting time than like here. March Madness is taking the spotlight. A lot of teams have kind of their playoff seeding fairly locked up and don't have much to play for and are kind of resting guys. And then other teams are kind of gearing up for the playoff hunt. The most compelling thing is probably like the seeding races, particularly in the West and then kind of in the middle of the East. But at the same time, we've been talking Lakers Warriors for a long time, and it's probably good to give that topic a bit of a rest for a little bit. So yeah, March Madness is starting. A lot of my draft spidey senses have peaked in the last few weeks, where I've started my annual draft scouting. So be on the lookout. Well, I don't have a Twitter since I'm still suspended. By the way, if anyone knows how to get a Twitter back, I don't think we've covered this on the pod, but we have been falsely and wrongly suspended for almost 2 months now. For literally no reason. So if anyone knows anyone at Twitter or how to get back an account that's been suspended for no reason, please let us know, because we miss it on there and we miss connecting with our followers.
Some are calling us the Julian Assange of NBA podcasts. Yeah, it's been a huge bummer. And frankly, that's why I stepped away for a few episodes, because it's hard for us to find new listeners without the X account that Max has put so much work into the last little while. So yeah, we continue to send in appeals and hope that works out. But yeah, I think this is a boring window of the NBA season. And I don't think it's as much to do with like style of play or the length of the regular season. I think the biggest issue right now is injuries and just not knowing who's going to be playing on a night-to-night basis, because I still love watching NBA games. In March, I don't care. Like, I'm watching Blazers Wizards on a Tuesday night and loving every second of it.
Sicko.
It's just not knowing what questionable means anymore, not knowing how injured DeAndre Ayton or Robert Williams actually is, and obviously way bigger name stars like taking nights off at the last second. We're just at a point in the year where the injury carousel is unpredictable and confusing. And I think that's a way bigger issue than any of the other sort of ratings concerns that I've heard tossed around recently.
1,000,000%. I've long been of the opinion that like concerns about 3-point shooting, whatever other ratings concerns, are way overblown. And the most fundamental thing is injuries, and fans don't know who's going to be playing every day, night to night. You know, either you buy tickets to go to a game. Like I went to the Warriors Nuggets game on Monday. I know that guys get ruled out late, so I literally waited till an hour and a half before the game to buy my tickets, and still Jokic and Murray were late scratches. Nuggets still won because Russell Westbrook played the funniest game I've ever seen in my life, and Aaron Gordon is still really good. But that's a big problem, and that's, you know, if I have that as like a diehard NBA fan, there's a ton of people out there who like buy tickets to go to games, and the people they want to see aren't playing. Tickets are more expensive than ever, and then, you know, just tuning in, you know, you set your plans. You're like, all right, Nuggets and Lakers are playing on a Wednesday. I'm really excited to see this. You tune in, and, you know, more than half of the stars in the game are out. you do that enough times, you get a lot of atrophy of viewers where, people stop tuning into those games in the weeknight because they just assume that someone's not going to be playing and they've been unsatisfied with the last few times they've watched. So I think by far injuries are the biggest issue that the NBA is facing right now. And if I was Adam Silver, I would be pouring every excess dollar I had into injury research. Why are people like actually getting hurt more than before, or is it just load management? If they are getting hurt more than before, why is that the case? I have my own theories that we could probably do a whole episode about related to 3-point shooting that I've been doing a light data analysis project on. But yeah, this isn't designed to be an NBA ratings discourse pod, but
No, but I would like to actually talk about it for a couple minutes
yeah,
because I am actually down to watch most NBA teams B teams. I actually don't care. Like I watched most of the Lakers game last night and it was like the Jordan Goodwin Bronny show.
Bronny.
And that's okay with me. The thing is, regular season games do start to feel meaningless to me, and I empathize with the casual fans who just check out for a while until the playoffs. Not because the product isn't still fun. Like we've talked ad nauseum about how it's time to expand because there are just so many good players, and we're going to talk about guys in this episode who are kind of overqualified for their roles and should probably be in better situations because they're so good and could explode in the right situation. But I sometimes will struggle to get pumped to watch a regular season game in March because, like, take the Grizzlies, for instance. There's nothing more I'm going to learn about Memphis at this point in the year. All I want to know is Ja going to be healthy for the playoffs?
Yeah.
Because Ja's had a weird hamstring shoulder situation. He's in, he's out. He will miss 4 games in a row, then come back and have like 30 and 15 assists. And we're at a point now where it's just like, is Ja going to be healthy for round one? Is Kawhi going to be physically okay for round one? Like these are the questions.
Yeah.
I think yeah. So that's really frustrating. It's like really hard to even like podcast and like make predictions or just talk with your friends about like potential playoff outcomes when really half your question is just who is going to be on the court for these games.
Yeah, and I'd be good with it if it meant we get healthy playoffs. But just like too often in the last few years, we haven't gotten that. And it's not guys' fault for getting hurt, but like, you know, I think the other thing that the NBA really needs is like an all-time classic playoffs because that's when the most people tune in. That's when you have the chance to pick up like people who weren't interested throughout the year and then they see like I think about myself with baseball last year. Baseball, I was not a fan for years. Like I was a Yankees fan when I was younger and then like kind of just didn't have time to follow baseball for a long time. Got back into the Yankees over the last couple years, but didn't know shit about any other MLB team basically, except for like, okay, Otani plays for the Dodgers. But like that's my MLB knowledge outside of the Yankees is minuscule. And last year in the playoffs, there were just a ton of really good MLB playoff games that I would just be tuning in to, like, who the Mets, I forget who the Mets played, but like the Mets playoff run was just like a bunch of insane games.
Yeah.
Dodgers Padres was also insane. And like, I don't know shit about any of these teams. I have no personal allegiance to any of them, but it was just really high quality, star studded baseball and it drew me in. And basketball could do the same thing if you just have those moments. And yeah, I'm good with like this dead part of the season. If it means like, yeah, we have a round two of Luka, LeBron, Steph, Jokic, Shea, Chet, Giannis, Brunson, all the Cavs and Celtics guys, like all healthy and ready to go, because that's like all-time peak level basketball if all those guys are playing. But if we have this dead part of the season and then you also have like the Celtics Eastern Conference playoff run last year, the Pacers Eastern Conference playoff run, where they're just going against these decimated teams, it just doesn't make for very compelling TV and it's not bringing new viewers in. So however they can try to prevent these injuries, I'm all for. Because a lot of them are legit. Like, Steph's gonna miss a couple games here because he just took a really hard fall on his tailbone last night, and that looks like it hurt. Like that's not an illegitimate injury. Same thing with Jokic. Like I was upset he missed the game, but then he missed the next game too, and he's been dealing with a lot of stuff. So like, as long as it means we get healthy stars in the playoffs, I'm all for it. But when they're not playing now and we're missing a lot of guys, then that's when it starts to feel a little bit like deflating.
Yeah. And that's when you start to empathize with the fans that are like, fuck these games, just get me to the playoffs so we can see actually what's real and what isn't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you do get an effect of like people who used to care about who used to be diehards of the whole season now kind of wait for the playoffs to kick in, and people who used to wait for the playoffs to be fans now might just like wait for the finals, and people who used to wait for the finals maybe now just don't tune in at all. And I think you see this kind of like cascading effect of like losing fans, which is what the NBA has seen. And yeah, I think injuries are one of the biggest things leading to that. But yeah. All right. The main topic for today's show is something that Drew and I came up with over the summer, called the rescue draft. And we actually kind of came up with it, I think, or at least I came up with it thinking about Cade Cunningham because he was such like a highly touted prospect and showed major flashes in his first few years, but was just toiling away on this Pistons team that had shown very little signs of progress in any of his 3 years in the league. And it got me thinking about like, who are the NBA players that if we could just like wave a magic wand and transfer to a new functional, stable situation, who would those players be? And now Cade, as Pat Riley says, you have to be a master of your own rescue. You have to be an active participant in your own rescue. He is the primary driver for the reason that the Pistons are no longer in the shitty state that they were in before. So he has taken himself out of the rescue draft like consideration. The Pistons are in a great spot. We've been big Pistons, supporters and truthers since the offseason, especially me. Not to take a victory lap, but yes. And now that we're kind of in this dead zone of the season, we thought it would be fun to bring this idea back into the front of our minds and think about who is out there right now who needs to be rescued from the basketball situation that they're in. Drew, anything to add on the concept?
No, I was the first king of Cade on this podcast. I just want to say that. You were the Pistons guy. I was the Cade guy originally. All right, let's go.
All right. So we're just going to go back and forth talking about guys, and we'll try to go in order of like who needs to be rescued the most. So it's like a soft draft, but we'll just end up talking about a bunch of guys. So you want to go first? I'll go first.
Okay, go.
I don't want to steal your thunder here because I feel like you probably have this guy at the top of your list. We need to rescue Tyrese Maxey. If you think about where we were a year ago, Maxey was one of the most exciting young rising stars in the league. Like after the playoffs, he probably had like a fringe top 20 player case. He was in the same conversations as guys like Tyrese Halliburton, John Morant, Darius Garland, Trae Young. For people who are big fans of his, we probably would have him a little bit below that class of guys, but he was in there. And this year has just been like completely forgotten because of the mess in Philadelphia. Like, is Joel Embiid ever going to be healthy again? Paul George is just starting a 4-year max contract and looks worse than Tobias Harris, who Sixers fans complained about for years. And the franchise just seems to be kind of like rotting away around him. And Maxey is basically the one bright spot. And his numbers have taken a significant dip this year, too, because it's a lot harder to be a primary creator when the rest of your team just isn't up to your level. So I don't really know how he's going to be rescued. Like Philly's not trading him unless they like totally bottom out. But he's just someone who is such an exciting player. He plays with so much like joy, although I think that's an overused word in basketball discourse, but it's really true in his case. He's dynamic. He gets to the rim. He's a great shooter. And this year he's just kind of like completely fallen out of the consciousness because Philly's such a mess.
Yeah, he deserves better. I think, yeah, the joy thing is cliche, but he just seems like a fundamentally like positive hooper. And so I understand what you mean by that. He doesn't have like any prima donna in him from what I've seen, and just has a reputation for being like really youthful and electric on and off the court. And yeah, I just wouldn't overreact to his efficiency numbers this year, I think that he is exactly the guy we saw in the Knicks series last year. And if he ends up on the trade market somehow, like I would overpay for Tyrese Maxey. I still think that he has a chance to be like a prime Dame caliber guard
Mm,
playmaker.
yeah. I mean, he's a guy who averaged a very efficient 35 and 7, 30 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists in that series against New York last year. Like, and yes, he was playing as like the second option off of a hobbled Embiid who still draws a ton of attention even when he's hobbled. But yeah, it's like I imagine him playing off of like, I mean, I know the Spurs just traded for Fox, but like imagine Maxey playing off of Wemby, or just he's like such a perfect second option because he's so fast. Like if you get him against a rotating defense, he's so fast to beat closeouts off the dribble. Like no one can stay with him. In that Knicks series, he was absolutely terrifying. Like we had no one who could stay in front of him, and he just got to the basket at will. He was shooting the lights out. And yeah, he just deserves to be playing in more real basketball games. And he's younger than probably a lot of the guys we're going to talk about today. He's got a lot of basketball ahead of him, and he's still getting better. But I had so much fun. I mean, fun's a relative word because I was rooting against him, but he was so electric in the playoffs last year, and has shown that in the past as well. That he just deserves better. That's all there is to it.
And he has that highly coveted combo of elite shooting ceiling and the ability to get into the lane, finish at like maximum speed with
Yeah,
touch. He's got crazy touch when he is absolutely flying through the lane, which
yeah.
I think puts him on a very short list in that regard. Okay. Lowry Markkinen. I think I want to rescue him. I just Markkinen had two straight awesome offensive seasons and then a significant regression this year on a team that is doing everything it can to lose.
Yeah.
He is much better than Kyle Kuzma, but I don't want to see what happened to Kuzma in Washington happen to Lowry in Utah, where it's just like there's this really talented scoring forward who just is stowed away on a team that doesn't have any near future. And I don't blame Utah for not wanting to part ways with him. Like they shouldn't. They'd trade him for a package that would hopefully produce a player that reaches his level right now. And obviously Utah, Danny Ainge, Will Hardy, like these are aggressive guys that don't want to suck for very long, but it's hard to imagine them being a significant team anytime in the next couple of years. They're just a long ways away. And Markkinen is so good when things are right. I think he's just struggled to stay motivated and healthy this year. And so all his numbers are down, efficiency's down, raw stats are down. But I think he's still the guy who can average 22 plus on almost 50, 40, 90 type stuff. And I'd love to see him playing off of stars on just a more competitive team. I think Markkinen is an offensive beast.
Yeah, he's just such a cool, interesting, like unique player. Like this 7 foot off ball, like dynamic weapon. He's like an even bigger Michael Porter Jr. with more off the bounce game. I'd be really interested if he ever had the chance to play off Jokic. That would be like just such an amazing combo to watch because he's so good as a spot up player. And yeah, I had him down as well. I mean, like further down on my list because he's also on the younger side. Although I guess he's actually been around like a little while. He's not that young, but yeah, it's just he's a really cool, interesting player, and he's toiling away in obscurity. And I agree. I want to see him in a basketball situation, playing games that matter, not having to be the best guy on his team, not having to shoulder the full offensive burden every night, and like this Utah team, they've got some interesting young guys, but I don't really see what the pathway is to them getting significantly better short of like winning the lottery or like really hitting on a superstar in the draft. That's kind of like their only pathway. And this year they're at least fully embracing the tank and trying to improve their odds of getting that guy. But yeah, they seem very far away from being competitive. And
Yeah.
I don't
I
want
mean,
Lauri Markkanen playing in all these non-competitive games.
there are a couple guys that I'd like to rescue on the Jazz who are not as good as Larry Markkinen. Like I'd like to rescue Walker Kessler, who's just an
Hmm.
awesome rim protector, showing more on offense this year. Awesome rebounder too. Sean Collins could play a role on a good team. Like he
Yeah.
just has a lot of scoring juice. But yeah, I'm just not very optimistic about the Jazz in the short term because I don't see much of a star ceiling in guys like Keontae George, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Bryce Sensabaugh. I think they've got a lot of competent role players in the making. And Collier's had a really good rookie season, and he's the one that might pop in a way that could change things for them. But yeah, Markkinen is just too good to be on this team, and we've already seen Markkinen scale up as like the best guy on a bad team. I just know that he could go nuts when he isn't the number one guy on his team scouting report,
Yeah.
and it's too bad we don't get to see the dimension where he feels like that the contract slot that the Dubs now have with Jimmy Butler, because there was a lot of like Markkinen to Golden State buzz. I don't think Golden State ever offered anything close to what Danny Ainge wanted. But yeah, you mentioned playing next to Jokic. I think Markkinen also would have been a fascinating offensive force next to Draymond and obviously Steph as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. My next guy, Devin Booker. How did it get so bad for Devin? Like,
Yeah.
if
And
we're
they also it's really bad right now. The Suns have the toughest schedule remaining this year, so they seriously just might be out of the playoffs, out of the play-in.
yeah,
It's bizarre, but we're here.
we're gonna have to watch this zombie Mavericks team in the play-in. There also should not be a play-in this year. Like the NBA needs to institute, we can call it the Rosillo rule, where like if you're a certain threshold back of the eight seed, you just don't qualify for the play-in, because yeah, these especially, I mean, the East play-in is just going to be not appointment television. But anyways, Devin Booker. If we go through the timeline of the last few years, like 2020, he was like the new it star after that bubble run where they went to the bubble. They went 8-0 in the bubble. Everyone was kind of like confused as to why they got invited, but then they looked really good. He hit a game winner over Kawhi and Paul George. Everyone was just like super in on him. 2021, they trade for Chris Paul. They have the best record in the West. They make the finals. Booker was phenomenal throughout the playoffs. It was kind of debatable whether he or Chris Paul was their best player, but on his career is like a 28 5-5 guy in the playoffs on efficient shooting, like a really high level playoff performer. And 2022, he was clearly the best guy that year. They had the best record in the West. They were up 3-2 on Dallas, and basically since then it has just been a increasingly rapid decline for this whole franchise, where he talks trash to Luka, they get blown out in the next two games, and they go home. Injuries derail the first KD year, and after they trade for KD and they trade basically all of their depth for KD, they trade any of their remaining depth for Bradley Beal, which was really like the death knell, and it's just been a disaster since then, which is not of his doing. And when they've made the playoffs, he's still been great. Like people, I don't know if people remember his series against Denver a couple years ago, where he was like had one of the greatest like hot shooting streaks I've seen over a multi-game span from a player. He was averaging 34 on 60% shooting on like almost exclusively tough jump shots in that playoff run. And it seemed like a few years ago this guy was on track to being one of the signature stars of the league. And just with the way the last few years have gone and the mismanagement of this team, instead he's just kind of wasting away in this horrible situation. Kind of like Maxey.
Yeah, I love Booker. I can't believe we're here with Phoenix. I thought that they were going to be better this year. They last year was just they got swept round one versus Minnesota. I thought maybe they'd win a round this year, depending on how matchups ended up breaking down. But yeah, it's just been a series of disasters for them. And Bradley Beal is out again for at least a week. So it looks highly unlikely that they're even going to get into the 10 seed. And it's weird that Durant has been as good as he's been, and still they just like can't figure out how to be a top 8 seed. Budenholzer probably not there for long. And it doesn't seem like they're really enjoying playing basketball together. Like Kevin Durant can say like it's tough love and they're just communicating openly, and NBA basketball is intense, but like it seems like the body language doctors are on point here, and like this team just hates playing together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I agree. And I had Kevin Durant down too. I don't know if you did because he's a little bit responsible for the situation that he's in. So I don't know if like rescue's the right words, but we can talk about him too. Um, but I mean, they're the clearest indicator of just how important depth is in the league because they're throwing out these lineups that are just like, maybe KD, Devin Booker, and the three guys you're surrounding with would have gotten it done 10 years ago. But we're in a league now where, the fifth option on a lot of teams is like a fringe all-star player 10 years ago. Obviously the Celtics are one of the most loaded teams in the league, but when you're throwing out KD, Devin Booker, and then like Tyus Jones and aging Royce O'Neal and Nick Richards as your other three guys, or I've seen them start Bol Bol at times, and you're throwing that against like the supporting cast of, you know, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Isaiah Hartenstein, or even like some of the guys the Lakers are throwing out, or like Christian Brown, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. Like
Or
that's
like
just
Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo, Nikhil Alexander Walker.
there's a lot of teams in the league who have like seven or eight guys who would start for Phoenix. And yeah, it shows. I mean, they vastly overestimated their ability to deal with the second apron and still create a viable team around these guys with all the cap constraints that provided. And it's another example of new owner syndrome that Bill Simmons loves to talk about whenever like a new owner comes in and buys up a team. Almost always tries to make some big splashy move and almost always horribly backfires. See Patrick Dumont of the Dallas Mavericks. By the way, Boston Celtics just got purchased by a new owner. You have to think that in the situation they're in, they would be impervious to new owner syndrome, but you never know. Just something to keep an eye on for a couple years down the line.
Yeah,
Um,
Jalen Brown might, become a little bit distracted with his teaching job at MIT. There there are things that could go wrong in Boston.
exactly. And yeah, KD, like, if we just want to talk about KD, Steph and LeBron are at least going to get they've had their twilight years where they've still been able to play like important competitive games. The last like really important game I can remember KD playing is that 2021 Game 7 against Milwaukee, and he's just whenever you see an all-time great just kind of stuck in purgatory and still playing really well, he strikes me as someone who should be rescued. But it is important to keep in mind he did this to himself. Like he I didn't love first if you just replay his career from 2016 on, like it could have been so much better. Like he feels like he's gonna have one of the great all-time just like weird careers of how it should have gone. But taking the Golden State stuff out of it, like going to Brooklyn, aligning himself with Kyrie and Harden, and just kind of two kind of unreliable guys. And yes, they had unlucky turns along the way, but just they're aligning themselves with guys who had histories of being kind of difficult. And you go from that to he forces Kenny Atkinson to be fired because wants to start Jared Allen, and we see Kenny Atkinson now as one of the best coaches in the league. Then he wants Steve Nash, fired and all that, and then he forces his way to Phoenix where they trade all their stuff for him. He gets to play with Devin Booker, but it's like two pure hoopers just shooting tough jumpers and not actually getting a ton of wins. And like that's why I didn't have him higher on my list because he is probably the player of the greatest stature who I think really needs to be rescued, or at least one of them. But having done it to himself, I kind of like bump him down a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's still like a top 15-ish all-time player who probably should be playing out the string in a more kind of dignified way along the lines of LeBron and Steph.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Yeah, just to go from 2021 and all the really, really good role players they had, and Bridges, Cam Johnson, the Chris Paul effect in Phoenix was real, to where we are now. Yeah, it's not all about building the most, superstar shiny top heavy roster anymore. There's way more to team building, and I wonder how Devin Booker thinks about it. I know he's enjoyed playing with KD. I know they have a good relationship, but like, I wonder behind closed doors how Devin Booker feels about the decay of Phoenix's roster.
Yeah. All right, give me a guy.
Santi Aldama.
No.
Santi Aldama is so good, like so good. I don't know how a Spanish dude from who played 2 years at Loyola, Maryland, um, and kind of was just an under the radar NBA draft guy, has become this enticing as a potential trade target. Memphis just has so many guys, and when they're fully healthy, he doesn't start for them. He's had some chances to start because he's a really competent shooter. Like, they can sometimes put him on the wing. He can play as a 3, 4, or 5. And I just really want to see Santi Aldama scaling up on a worse team. I'm really interested, sort of like when Markkanen went to Utah and we got to see like maximum offensive freedom. I think that there is so much interesting stuff to Adama's game. He's like a really, really talented live dribble passer as a 7-foot guy. The shooting has come along, and he's so aggressive and confident, to the point that like early in his Grizzlies stint, his field goal percentage was a little bit low, for a guy that big, just because he's always trying stuff and he's always trying to get downhill and dunk on guys. He's just an insanely interesting offensive talent. And
Yeah.
I really do believe, this guy has a chance to like hit an offensive ceiling that will that will look crazy in retrospect, because I just think there's so much untapped production. I don't know I don't think he has any significant holes in his game offensively. He's showed some like really interesting like finishing touch recently. He can kind of contort in the air. He's got this wiry strength, and I want to see him empowered more on a team that, just has less traffic in the depth chart. So yeah,
Yeah.
Santi Aldama, it isn't necessarily a rescue, because I think he's happy in Memphis and he's playing a decent amount, and he's going to be key to any playoff run that they may have this year. But yeah, just super talented guy that I think is a bit buried on one of the more talented teams in the league.
Yeah. And the thing with Santi Aldama that I feel like I always forget is just how big he is. Like, I think of him as being this like 6'7", 6'8" kind of wing, but he's like a legitimate 7-footer, who moves just really fluidly for a guy that size. And like, yeah, the new trend that we see kind of all around the league is like kind of the dual 7-footers who have skill, kind of going back to the double big thing now that there are guys who are big enough to still play perimeter oriented games. So you see that like with Cleveland, with Mobley and Allen, OKC with Holmgren and Hartenstein, and the list goes on kind of around the league. But I'd love to see him in like a starting role next to another like skilled 7-footer, and just see like what a really creative coach could do with that in terms of like defensive schemes, rim protection, all of that. So yeah, I scoffed, not because I don't love Santi Aldama, just because I did not expect that name. But yeah, I agree.
Such a good passer.
The Spanish know how to pass. It is known.
I'm gonna double dip right now,
Good.
real quickly. Can we get Yabusele out of Philly?
Yes.
He didn't fight his way back to the NBA for this shit. All
Yeah.
right, dude goes nuts in Paris. Unique player, just because you don't see many NBA players with that body type, but he has found his touch from the 3-point line and is so strong, like nobody can move him. When he's defending the ball, I just feel very confident that Yabu has winning DNA and can play a 3-and-D role with other stuff too to his game on a really good team. And I think it's just a bummer that he fought his way all the way back to the NBA, and now he's stuck in like the most depressing situation in the league.
Yeah. He kind of strikes me as like this era's version of PJ Tucker. Like he was like a late first round pick, and then he went back to Europe, and now he's kind of made his way back into the league now that he's improved his shot enough, and he's kind of this weird body for the NBA where he's kind of short, but he's so strong that and like long armed that he can play taller than he is and guard bigger guys. And I think I mean, he's still got a few years ahead of him as a really solid NBA player at least, and I think he can sort of play a similar role as like a small ball five at times, and just like a switchable four who can really guard some of these like stronger perimeter guys that we're seeing around the league. And yeah, there's a ton of teams in the league that would kill to have Yabu. Like even just thinking about the Knicks slotting him in there as like a four to who can still shoot but like give them a little bit more of a physical presence, like that's an obvious fit. There's a ton of teams around the league where he would be huge. Milwaukee as like a guy who would allow Giannis to slide to the five a little bit more consistently. Yeah, I love Yabu, and I agree. He's him, Maxey, and Jared McCain before he got hurt were like the three things Philly had going for them
Yeah.
before it all went to shit.
And he never stopped playing insanely hard. He's just so competitive, total dog. He's not going to block shots, but you can slide him over to the five in a pinch just because nobody can move him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. My next one's a twofer. Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart, two proud veterans dumped to Washington for kind of nothing and right before the trade deadline, so they didn't really have a chance to get rerouted anywhere else. Boston kind of built their Death Star on the sacrificial altar of Marcus Smart. And Middleton led the Bucks in minutes and was one of the leading scorers in the playoffs the year that they won the championship. So these are two guys who kind of gave their all, laid their bodies on the line, probably shortened their careers playing through stuff, playing for the two teams where they got their start in Milwaukee and Boston, and are now just stuck in one of the more unserious basketball environments in the league. And I think at least Middleton, I think, still has a decent amount to give. Smart has just been so injured that it's kind of hard to tell, but both these guys should just be back to playing in real playoff atmospheres. Like Middleton, even when the whole team was hurt last year, still had a really good playoffs. Like I'm never going to stop saying that. And yeah, his production took a step back this year because his minutes went down. He was dealing with injury, but I still think he can be a really valuable offensive creator for a lot of teams out there. And I'd love to see him in a more serious environment if he can find his way to a new team this summer. And kind of same with Marcus Smart, because he's still, the ultimate epitome of that dog mentality that you love to see in the playoffs. And I just think they both should not be in Washington. It feels wrong.
Yeah, I think Marcus Smart is diminished a significant amount. Like
Yeah.
he's not close to peak defensive powers. The shooting comes and goes. At his size, without the athleticism he used to have, he's not as much of a weapon to a playoff team, but he belongs somewhere.
Yeah.
These old guys still find ways to help, and he's not that old. He's not like Mike Conley old. But I just, yeah, vets belong on playoff teams when they just have the IQ of a guy like Marcus Smart. Cruel world that this is Middleton's reality now, but I guess it's been 4 years since the title, and he's another guy whose athleticism has really diminished in the last couple of years through all the surgeries. So, but it would be nice to see them cleared out of Washington so we can just let the young guys cook and see these vets helping teams in whatever capacity they still can.
Yeah, like let Middleton go play the Peyton Pritchard role for some team, or just be like the six-man gunner off the bench. Like I think he can still be really good at that, and he's a really good playmaker. Like I think Middleton more so than Smart, because Smart, I agree, is really just broken down, and that whole transaction for Memphis has been kind of a disaster where they traded first to get him and then a first to get off him. But Middleton especially, I think I just love to see him as like a third or fourth option on a really good team still.
I dogged on Marcus Smart just a little bit because like all the lineup stats with him are pretty bad. Like most advanced stats now tell you Marcus Smart is like a real negative, but I think there's still value there for sure, especially when he's on a more reasonable contract. But Peyton Pritchard, you mentioned him
Mm,
as like you just mentioned him as, maybe Middleton's role at this stage of his career. I don't think rescue is exactly the right word, but I think that there's an argument for Peyton Pritchard, similar to my Aldama spiel. Just like get Peyton Pritchard to a situation where he can max out his offensive abilities. I watched him hit 10 threes against the Blazers a couple weeks ago. He had like a 40, 10, and 5 game, and he's tenacious defensively for what he has at his disposal physically.
yeah,
Pritchard is awesome. I've been on this for years that
you have.
I think I said this like last year when we had Noah Dalzell on, that like I think that there's a sneaky, 1 or 2 time all-star ceiling for Pritchard. I'd say the over-under is definitely half an all-star appearance. He's 27, sneakily, like he's like right in the thick of his prime here because he played 4 years in college and it took him a couple of years to get going in the NBA. Being on the most talented roster in the league in the early stages of his NBA career. But yeah, I think Pritchard is awesome. There are guys getting chances on bad teams to play big minutes and run offense that I think are less qualified than Peyton Pritchard, and he can go completely nuclear as a shooter on his night, and is just one of the most tenacious competitors in the NBA. And so I think if you gave him the keys to a bad team's offense, I think he could probably go nuts and put up some efficiency and volume as a scorer and creator that we don't usually project onto guys of his background.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this Boston team, it's kind of hard to evaluate anyone on their team because they just have so much talent and the defense has to devote so much attention to so many areas of the court that it's like impossible to do, and everyone just gets to play one on one basically with no help, which is why it's been a little bit difficult to evaluate just how good Tatum and Brown are as number one, number two stars, and it makes it even more difficult when they miss games and then guys like Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser come in and have like 25, 30-point nights very consistently and regularly, and Boston seems like they barely miss a beat. Not a shot at not overly a shot at Tatum and Brown, but just wanted to lay that out there. But yeah, I agree. I mean, Pritchard, I'm sure, would love being in a bigger role where he can shoot as much as he wants. Like, I don't want to see him get the Jordan Poole experience where he just like goes to a completely lost team and just plays undisciplined basketball. But send him to a team where he can be like a starter at least. I like that. And yeah, we've seen just the shot creation and the shooting ability from deep 3-point range has just been insane this year. And yeah, I remember that pod with Noah where the two of you were both just having like a Peyton Pritchard love fest. And I thought it was a little bit over the top, but now seeing everything he's done this year, it was all on point. So yeah, I like that pick.
Yeah, 42% from three this year. I think devil's advocate would say he's helped so much by the defensive infrastructure in Boston, and like this is the role he's perfectly qualified for. And I hear that. And I think obviously there are tons of guys that could go to the Wizards and average 20 right now in the NBA and get paid a shit ton. And I think he's one of those guys. And but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's more winning substance to a theoretically scaled up Peyton Pritchard. That's just how incredible a shooter he is. And I think, yeah, it's in certain ways, it's a blessing getting to play with Derek White and Drew Holiday, and all the ball handling they have in Boston. In other ways, I think it has kind of hidden a potential all-star who doesn't look like any other all-stars that we've seen in recent memory.
Yeah. All right. It's funny. I feel like I've skewed very heavily older with my list and you've skewed a little bit younger. So it's kind of fun to go back and forth. I know he did this to himself and he picked this team, but every time, and I don't do this very often, but when I turn on a Dallas game and I see just the guys they have out there, and then I remember Klay Thompson's on the team, it always just kind of bums me out a little bit. And he went to Dallas thinking he was going to spend his twilight years in like a Ray Allen-esque role of like going to a ready-made finals team with a guy in Luca who could set him up for open threes just like without fail every game. And instead, he loses Luca. Kyrie gets hurt. He's going to miss this whole year and all of next year. He's now got AD, who's like not playing, and when he is playing, he's not someone who's going to generate offense for Clay all that much. And look, he's very past his prime. I'm not here to say like we deserve Game 6 Clay again because I think that ship has sailed, but I would still like to see him get that kind of Ray Allen experience of being that like bench shooting element for a contending team. And maybe I'm getting too nostalgic with all the old guys I have on here between KD and Klay Thompson and some of the other guys I've listed, Chris Middleton, but I still like. I don't want to see him playing in this broken Dallas Mavericks franchise. Like, I want to see him playing off of an elite playmaker, getting open threes. Like, he's still a really good shooter and a high volume shooter. I just want to see it. I just want to see it.
Yep. It's definitely not what he signed up for. I guess, yeah, I said Philly is arguably the most depressing situation. You know, obviously Dallas just blows them out of the water. Yeah, just all time heartbreak in Dallas that just gets worse and worse. Just found out that Gafford and Lively are practicing with the Texas Legends G League team and joining AD in those practices. And they're like almost definitely now out of the playing picture. And so I don't know why they'd bring those guys back. And something tells me if they do, one of them's going to get hurt again and it'll just be so comically dark. But yeah, I do feel for Clay because he found a fresh, exciting new chapter in Dallas for a second. And here we are now.
Yeah. All right. Give me another one.
Nick Claxton. I'll just do this one really quick. We don't need to do multiple minutes on Nick Claxton. I don't think he's really enjoying playing basketball for the Nets. He is paid a lot. He's making like 27 million this year, but it's a descending contract. So he's going to be making 20 million by 27, 28. And Nick Claxton is an insanely talented defensive big man. His scoring is down on a worse team with much more opportunity, which is weird. He had a bad hamstring for the first like half of the season, and new coach Jordi Fernandez was limiting his minutes. He's been playing more recently. He's just an awesome defensive playmaker with some subtle passing juice. And I think could be like a Draymond type of defensive Swiss Army knife / like dribble handoff specialist in the right situation. He's not Draymond, but he has some of those. He has a similar skill profile, I'll say.
Maybe like Hartenstein.
Yeah, for sure. And Claxton has been pretty emotionally volatile in recent years. Like I remember a couple of years ago when he like purposely got himself ejected, it felt like, versus Embiid. He's just like liable to lose his cool and hurt you in a big moment. But I think if he were playing with real star power, there's, maybe he'd put his ego aside and fit into a role and do the things that he does best. I just think he's a winning player. And I was kind of hoping that someone would take on that money and we could see him in a winning scenario. But unfortunately, he's still stuck in Brooklyn.
Yeah, he just seems like the kind of guy where if the Lakers traded for him, he would just be so good off of Luka. Like we've seen what Luka's done with Jackson Hayes, where Jackson Hayes looked like a fringe NBA player before Luka showed up, but he's athletic and can catch lobs and suddenly looks like a good starting center playing off of Luka. Like, take Nick Claxton and put him in that role where, like, not only can he roll for dunks, but he can also make reads out of the short roll when Luka gets, like, double teamed out of the pick and roll and kind of help pick defenses apart from there. And then couple that with, like, his Vanderbilt-esque switching on the other end and ability to be a versatile defender where you get sort of like the best of Vando at the five defensively, plus some rim protection, and then like a much more expanded ability to finish lobs and like punish teams out of Luka getting doubled. Like that's just a match made in heaven, which maybe they'll offer that same like connect and a pick package to the Nets that they offered for Mark Williams. I don't know if that would be enough to get it done or not, but he just seems like someone who, if the Lakers got their hands on him, he would just be fantastic.
Yeah. And he doesn't have anyone throwing him lobs right now. Like, forget Luka level lob throwing. Like, he doesn't really have any point guard help in Brooklyn. In fact, a lot of the time, until Cam Thomas recently got hurt, like Nick Claxton, you watch the Nets, he's just basically running laps. It just feels like a lot of games for him are just cardio, where he's running back and forth, watching Cam Johnson jack a 40-footer, and then he has to get back and switch on to guards and cover the poor defenders they have. But yeah, I watched the Nets host Golden State a few weeks ago at Barclays, and Jimmy Butler was torching pretty much everyone on the Nets, getting low and with that like signature Jimmy Butler bend, putting his shoulder on your hip and just like out strengthen you and getting like turning the corner and finishing. And Nick Claxton was the one Nets player that I saw switch onto Jimmy and really give him trouble with his strength and length. And I just thought that was super impressive. It reminded me the ceiling this guy could have as a playoff chess piece.
Yeah. All right. You mentioned Peyton Pritchard. Someone who I'd like to see in the Pritchard role on a really good team is Malik Monk. And I just like Malik Monk. He's a gamer, great shooter. He's an elite free throw shooter, which I always like because I feel like that's a real tell of like who the pure shooters are, the guys who are like close to 90% from the free throw line.
I agree with you. Recently, Quentin Grimes has been a crazy counterexample where he's like shooting the absolute lights out and for some reason is a head case at the free throw line like 60% in the last couple of weeks.
Not
but yeah, I'm with you. Sorry. Just a little bit of Grimes love. He's been nuts.
Yeah,
Grimes. More Dallas Payne.
Grimes, yeah. And Monk, he's such a fun player. Like he's got this elite athleticism, but also is an elite shooter and is also an underrated playmaker. He's really shouldered more playmaking burden for Sacramento since they got rid of Fox, and he's just really fun and should be in a more fun environment than like this 9 seed sort of like fringe play-in like perennial Kings team. And yeah, I just love to see him play the role he's playing now, just on a better team. And I don't know if he has any avenues really to getting to a different team. I just think like if you put him on Boston, he could do what Peyton Pritchard is doing, I think. Like he's got that level of shot making and shot creation, and could do the same thing for like, a dozen other playoff teams that I think would be a little bit more of a fun environment to showcase his skills compared to the environment that he's in now.
Yes, sir. With you there. All right, let me just fire off a few more names. Cam Johnson on the Nets, just insane shooter. Belongs on a winning team. He should be scoring less, but impacting winning more on a competitive squad. I think Anthony Black is still a guy I love on the Magic, but it's hard for him to really thrive offensively on a team that is playing so much of Paolo Franz and Wendell Carter, none of whom are really big time shooting gravity guys. And Anthony Black, the one hole in his game is the long range shooting. And if he could go somewhere with better spacing, I think he could really thrive as a penetrator on offense. Isaiah Stewart in Detroit is like losing minutes every night to Jalen Duren. And I think Isaiah Stewart is better than Jalen Duren. So I put him on my list. Jaime Jaquez, I continue to fight for that man. Also, I think we underrate in Miami for how amazing Bam is. And I still love Bam to death. He's been a little bit destructive for the guys around him offensively this year, just because he's playing a bit of like early 2000s basketball, a lot of mid-range pull-ups. And I don't think it's so easy to thrive as a playmaker around Bam this year, just because of the places on the floor that Bam is trying to do his damage. So I'd still love to see Jaime Jaquez get a real chance. It's weird to see a guy playing fewer minutes from rookie to sophomore year on a team that got worse. That's been really disappointing for me. I was hoping for a big Jaime breakout, but there's just so much driving talent in Jaquez's game, and with also like real passing vision and the ability to make really tough shots and create mismatches with his like positional versatility. So I hope Jaime Jaquez gets a chance, whether it's in Miami or elsewhere, to be the player I think he can be. This year's been a step back for him.
Yeah, I agree with those. And yeah, just to fire off like some of my remaining kind of honorable mentions. Naz Reid, he deserves to be a starter somewhere, and I think that's probably going to happen this summer, whether it's through Julius Randle walking and he becomes that starter on the Timberwolves, or some other team gives him a bag. Bill Simmons has been making Pelicans noise. I don't know if there's anything to that or if he's just recklessly speculating, but Naz Reid, just ever since last year, has seemed like he deserves to be a starter, and like a high level center or power forward starter on another team. So he's one. Knicks nostalgia edition, Emmanuel Quickley and Dante DiVincenzo both have been like really fun contributors for the Knicks over the years, and now are kind of in at least Quickly is like really in obscurity and has dealt with a lot of injuries on this weird Toronto team. And he just got this big contract too, which is probably like, you love Emmanuel Quickly when you have him on a rookie deal. And then once you're paying him like 20 to 30 million, it's not as fun of an experience anymore. But he was just such an easy guy to root for with his defense and his 3-point shooting that I'd love to see him get some more real playoff moments, but he's probably a little bit further down the list. DiVincenzo was just like had an all-time beloved Knicks season last year, culminating in that game winner against Philly.
He's coming on. He's playing more and coming on for the Wolves. I think all that Dante Hive knew that he deserved to be playing more for that team, especially because you're always going to need injection of shooting when Julius Randle and Gobert are on the floor all the time. And obviously, like, you got to open things up for Ant. Dante's coming on. The Quickly thing is tough because it's like, I keep arguing that I want to see some of these super talented guards like running point on a bad team, and Quickly has that. I think it's just been an injury riddled, disappointing year all around for the Raptors. And I kind of like the situation he's in. I think he's a good point guard to have next to Scotty Barnes. I don't think that they're going to be a world beating core in the future, but I don't know. I think I'd push back a little bit on the Quickly one. Fair just enough. Because his game has blossomed with more freedom in Toronto.
Yeah, fair enough. LaMelo Ball, like, his career has just kind of never gotten off the ground in Charlotte. And I think a lot of that is, it's some of it's on him, some of it's on just the organization, which has been cursed since its inception, basically. But he's been hurt all the time. I don't know if it's like a him problem, a Charlotte training staff problem, because it seems like their whole team is hurt quite a lot between him and Mark Williams and Brandon Miller. But with that being said, like, EPM, estimated plus minus, which is one of the better advanced metrics out there, still has him as like a fringe top 30 player. And he's still so young and so unique as like a 6'8" ball handler who can really shoot it, can really pass it, and just plays this like unique freewheeling style. It just feels like his career hasn't really gotten started. And I just want to see him in like a real basketball environment, because I'm not sure if Charlotte will be that, even if I like some of the pieces that they're building around. I think you said it well. I think LaMelo is like somewhere around the 30th best player in the league, and that's okay. And I told you I was writing down ways you can guarantee I will unfollow you on social media, and one of them is LaMelo Ball propaganda. Like, LaMelo is still the super talent. He is not even close to a superstar, and I think is a bit of a nightmare to watch sometimes, just with the shots he's willing to take. He's not taking quite as many shots as he was early in the year when he was like prime Kobe levels of selfishness on offense. But he's still up there. He's still roaming in that atmosphere, and long way to go if he's going to be like fitting into a winning environment. Yeah. Did you think about Jabari Smith at all?
No, but that's a really good name. He's been doing good stuff for Houston. He was out a while, came back a couple weeks ago, and is like I just get the feeling Ime Udoka really likes Jabari Smith because even when he's not scoring or he's not making shots, he continues to play 30 plus minutes on a really deep team with a lot of guys who are fighting for those minutes. So I think Jabari Smith's toughness, the secondary rim protection, and the floor spacing that he generally provides on offense is keeping him on the floor. And maybe he's in a good situation. I haven't seen much that would lead me to believe that he'd be like exploding with more responsibility on offense. So I'm okay with where he is, I think.
Yeah. He's sort of one of those stereotypical like second draft guys of, he
Yeah.
was in real conversations to be the number one overall pick that year when it was sort of him, Chet, and Paolo as the consensus top three in that class. And yeah, he seems like the kind of guy who a GM would take a chance on as like a second draft sort of guy. And yeah, the only other thing I wrote down because I couldn't pick any one person from this team was the entire New Orleans Pelicans franchise. They've just had,
Yeah.
I mean, I was speaking about curses with Charlotte. Like they've just had an absolutely cursed year where like Herb Jones is out for the year. Trey Murphy was out for a while, came back, looked pretty good, and now tore his labrum, and he's out all this year. And I would bet is probably going to be out for some of next year as well. Zion missed the start and has come back and has actually looked pretty good. And
But if you want me to unfollow you, tweet that Zion looks lean or back in Duke level shape. That's another good way to get the unfollow.
yeah, he does look pretty lean though. And yeah, like I couldn't really pick one guy because New Orleans has always been weird. It's a team where I like a lot of the individual pieces, but it just doesn't like gel for some reason. Where like I love Herb Jones. I think he's one of the elite 3-and-D role guys in the league. Trey Murphy has just continued to excel and get better every year, and both those guys I think deserve to be playing high-profile playoff games. Zion, for all of his faults, still is intoxicating on a night-to-night basis when he's right, like he was against Minnesota the other night, and he loves playing against Minnesota and Sacramento for some reason. If he could bring that against every team in the league, that would be great. But for some reason, it's just he really loves going at Minnesota. I don't know if it's a Gobert thing or what. And yeah, it's just like, and they've drafted well. Like, Alvarado is an undrafted guy. I still kind of like Hawkins, although he's probably going to be too small to ever really be that great. Anything beyond like probably Malik Beasley would be like a really good outcome for him at this point, but I still really like him as a shooter. And yeah, I couldn't pick one person to save from them. I just feel like they all kind of need to be disbanded or like move the team somewhere else. All their home games are kind of dead too. Like
How did we go down the New Orleans rabbit hole? We can't, but I totally agree. Like all the old names, Trey Murphy, rescue Zion from himself. I think, yeah, I think the Pelicans are, need to be rescued and
yeah,
maybe shipped to Seattle or something.
yeah. That's all I got, unless the Bucks go out in horrible fashion and then Giannis needs to be rescued. But that's all I got.
Okay. Other ways to get me to unfollow you. Anything about how Jason Tatum is deeply underappreciated and sneakily on pace to have a top 8 career of all time. Jokic slander, picking apart Jokic's defense, finding the lazy defensive moments from him. Any attempts to reduce SGA's greatness to a montage of his worst foul baiting. These are the other guaranteed ways to get Drew to unfollow you.
Yeah, those are just like the core tenets of toxic NBA Twitter, basically. All the Shea foul baiting discourse just makes me want to claw my eyes out. Like, do people not remember that Kobe invented the rip through move when your hand is in the cookie jar? Like, and guys, we praised him for it because it was cagey. It was like,
Yeah.
a wizened vet move where he would get a shooting foul out of it, where you'd have your hand in there and he would just rip through, grab the arm, and go into like a shot and try to get an and one out of it. Like this has been part of the game for ages. Guys try to draw fouls.
Yeah.
All the elite scorers get fouled a ton, and maybe there's more ethical and less ethical ways of doing it. It all comes out in the playoffs where like the more ethical foul drawing, if we want to call it that, like it usually translates to the playoffs, like Jimmy Butler, where he's just like being physical and getting fouled and he's still shooting a
Yeah.
ton of free throws in the playoffs. And then you have like the Trae Young side of things where like, you don't draw as many fouls in the playoffs when they don't call those like running into you from behind fouls as much. But like I don't know why we're talking about this. We saw Shea be amazing in the playoffs last year. Like we know he's not a playoff dropper just from what we saw last year. Like I agree. That's the stuff that really drives me crazy.
And the vast majority of his game is creating space to the point that like guys can't foul him because he creates so much separation.
And it's lost in conversation too much that guys foul when they can't guard someone. Like you foul when you're out of position and you have to use your hands to get yourself back in position. So people get fouled a lot because guys can't stay in front of them.
I have never the benders of the rules have always been some of my favorite players. Like I never held it against Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry, like even their most egregious stuff. I really believe don't hate the player, hate the game, officiate differently if you don't want to, incentivize this type of behavior. I've been a huge Draymond fan his whole career, a little bit less recently because I feel like the Draymond antics have reached a point of absolute no return.
Yep.
We should talk about the Knicks soon and Cat and the Draymond Cat back and forth. But I think that's all we got today. I think we need to get to our TVs and watch some March Madness.
I think so. Thanks everyone for listening. Peace.
Boris Dirk.